Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. We are so incredibly excited to have you here tonight for a special Faith and OCD Roundtable with the IOCDF, where we're going to be talking about what it means to find light in the darkness, especially during the holiday season. Keeping in mind that this is a beautiful season for many, but also can be a really tough season for many. And we're going to talk about all of the things that might come with that, paying particular attention to different faith traditions and how OCD might pop up, but also the ways that we can continue to have conversations in mental health across faith traditions, again, while always finding light in the darkness. We would encourage y'all as we go through the stream tonight to feel free to engage in the comments and in the chat. We already see some questions coming in, and we'll do our best to get to as many of those as possible. But we're also going to start with just kind of a general open dialogue here. But please ask questions. Please support one another. And just want to give us some quick housekeeping pieces. So this live stream is educational and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, you can work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can use the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/findhelp to locate a trained clinician near you. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. If you're in a crisis or if you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. You can also access online at www.988lifeline.org. And finally, we want to create as safe a space as possible and be kind and respectful to absolutely everyone. At the end of the day, we are all here to support one another. So we encourage you to offer that support to one another in the chat, while also remembering that this is being broadcast on several social media platforms and is being recorded. So keep that in mind as you post. So I'm going to dive into some bios of our awesome panelists here today, and then we will get right into the dialogue. And again, as we get into that, as folks come in, feel free to drop anything in the chat, and we will get started shortly. So first, we have Annie, who has been a great member of a lot of our faith and OCD initiatives at the IOCDF. Annie has OCD and is an OCD advocate, has been an intricate part of the Faith and OCD special interest group, even writing songs related to faith and OCD and ACT and what it means to run towards your values. She's a Jewish educator, teaching Hebrew, preparation for bar and bat mitzvah. She teaches 8th grade Tikkun Olam, which means repair the world, and also teaches music. And I know has so much insight for us tonight, just like she brings to all of our special interest groups with the IOCDF. So thanks for being here, Annie. Thanks. And then we have Dr. Emily Malkoun, who is a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in evidence-based treatment of anxiety and related disorders, currently based in Detroit. She has lectured and published on best practice treatment of obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma resiliency, and multicultural adaptations of exposure-based psychotherapies. Dr. Malkoun received a bachelor's degree in theology from the University of Notre Dame and Master of Divinity from Harvard University. She completed a PhD in clinical psychology from Bryn Mawr College. I didn't know that. Interesting. Okay, well, more connections. A postdoctoral fellowship at Emory University. Trauma and Anxiety Recovery Program. Dr. Malkoun trained at the University of Pennsylvania Center for the Treatment and Study of Anxiety, where she later served as a staff psychologist. She's also a certified hospital chaplain and has worked in the pastoral care departments at Massachusetts General Hospital, the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania, and Beaumont Hospital in Detroit. So Emily, we are so incredibly excited to have you here today with your wealth of experience in theology across faith traditions, but also in the treatment of OCD. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, we have Abhijith, who is a writer based in Austin, Texas, and the founder of Mon Mukti, a nonprofit dedicated to reducing mental health stigma in the South Asian American community. Abhi founded Mon Mukti after the loss of a dear friend to encourage others within his community to speak up and raise awareness. He is somewhat a recent graduate of Divinity School, where he studied Hindu theology. And outside of his day job, he aims to write fiction and nonfiction that finds a place for Hinduism and faith in the modern world. And I will just speak to the fact that as someone who I served as a school chaplain in Atlanta for a long time and got to know Abi through that process, and the amount of talks that he was able to set up for my students in the South Asian community around mental health, where they would hear from folks really for the first time navigating similar struggles. And even the last year that I was there, last year where Abi actually came and spoke to the students, it was for weeks and weeks and weeks after that I was still hearing from students, I feel like I can talk about this for the first time. So the work that you have done and continue to do makes a huge difference.
Thank you so much. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you for folks in the chat. Yeah, Kevin, we're so excited to have you here, and Grace. I know we have some familiar faces already plugging in. But I'd love to just start off. This is an OCD stream. We're going to be talking some more about general mental health. But I always love to just start off with really, what is OCD? What are obsessions and compulsions? What does this mean? What does this look like? And more specifically, on these faith and OCD streams, what is religious scrupulosity? And what is the treatment for that? I'm going to throw that over to Emily to get us started. I also realized in saying OCD that I didn't introduce myself. I think I know most folks on this stream probably at this point, because I do a lot with the IOCDF. But for anyone I don't know, I'm Katie. I'm an ordained minister. I have OCD. I am very open about that because I want folks to know that clergy can, in fact, navigate their mental health while engaging in their faith practices. And I work full-time in the area of religious scrupulosity alongside clinicians to support evidence-based treatment while also helping individuals live into their faith in authentic ways. So that's a little bit with me. But I'm going to turn it over now to Emily to tell us, what is OCD, what's religious scrup, and what does this treatment look like?
Sure. Well, Katie, psychoeducation about what OCD actually is and what scrup is actually a really important part of treatment, and really is the first step of it. So OCD is an anxiety condition characterized by intrusive, unwanted, upsetting thoughts, fears, or unwanted, upsetting images that come into somebody's mind, that they don't want to be having. For a lot of people, these are experienced as constant. They can't get rid of them. And it's accompanied by the need to complete physical or mental rituals, okay? Rituals can be physical or mental actions that people feel they have to do to either prevent a feared outcome or just make anxiety go down in the moment, so that they feel like they can function and have some semblance of peace. So OCD differs from generalized anxiety disorder in a very important way, in that it tends to really sort of focus in on specific themes, whereas generalized anxiety can kind of, attach to anything and everything for someone. And so, it tends to be things that are really important to a person, because OCD just loves to destroy somebody's happiness, and really ruin, I always say this to people that I'm privileged to work with. It's really trying to steal your joy. So it's going to find the thing that's most important to you, and or something where there's a lot of uncertainty. Okay. So right away, themes like religion, morality are very ripe for OCD. But a lot of times this type of OCD, scrupulosity, the formal term, gets missed because out, in sort of the mainstream culture, it's not really how OCD tends to be viewed. And within religious traditions, that person can often be positively reinforced for what appears on the outside, like, perfectionistic or highly religious behavior, but really the person's suffering inside. Scrupulosity affects people across faith traditions, but it also can affect people who would tell you that they're agnostic or atheist. And it's really important that those folks know that this is very much within the realm of this. And common obsessions are fears of, eternal damnation or punishment, even for people who might not even believe that's not even their understanding of an afterlife. A fear of blaspheming, sinning, offending God. punishment. And really a lot of times when you are able to talk to people who live with this, when they're not kind of in the OCD zone, they'll tell you that's not really their image of the divine, or that they really don't believe there is like a God out there who would do that. So it really often contrasts with somebody's actual faith experience, but it just feels so true. And so common rituals, depending on the tradition, can be things like overly fixating on certain religious practices. Like for instance, in my tradition, Catholicism, you'll get people who, they'll do what they call like church hop for confession. A friend of mine who's a priest says that he'll start to, advise these people to limit it to like once a month, or prayers, obsessively doing prayers. And the problem is that what starts to happen is the person's the OCD takes over and kind of gets in the way of somebody actually being able to live out and experience their faith. And so the treatment for this type of OCD is the same as for any type of OCD, which is exposure and ritual prevention. Rituals and avoidance are what maintains OCD symptoms, whatever the theme is it's attaching to. And so what we do is we adapt this, highly effective evidence-based treatment protocol to that person's individual manifestation of their religiosity OCD. So we would design exposures where they would be approaching situations that are considered acceptable, within the faith tradition, like what is sort of within the normal continuum of faith practice, right? And a common thing, and then we also do ritual prevention. So for instance, a common thing I do is I might start out saying to somebody, you are not allowed to pray if you're praying because you're afraid of something, right? You can pray for comfort, strength, gratitude. So that, and people find such relief when they get that. So, the goal is really to help somebody ultimately distinguish between, OCD fears masking as faith practice and real life situations where we might have anxiety and seek guidance, and actual true faith rituals that deepen one's sense of being loved and connected to what's meaningful to them. So I hope that answers.
That beautiful. And there's so much I just want to highlight that you said, and such a great description of ERP and OCD. And especially, I really hope folks here, when we're thinking about religious scrupulosity, I know it can feel really scary to lean into treatment. And we hear that on streams a lot, that folks are often afraid, well, what if I'm going to be asked to do something that opposes my faith tradition? And what I hear you saying, and is so important, is that no, we're asking folks to do something that's within the scope of their tradition that might be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's in order to fight the OCD, to help you get back to your faith in a way that's value driven, that's not dictated by the fear or the urgency or the anxiety or the guilt, but a genuine relationship with the divine in beautiful ways. So that work that you're doing, and I see folks commenting in the chat on that, is incredibly powerful. Across traditions, like you said, where religious scrupulosity is not specific to a faith tradition. I always tell folks OCD is all really gross ice cream and all really gross ice cream flavors, that it latches on in all sorts of different ways, not specific to the theme. And it'll latch on to anything important to you. So I know you spoke a little bit about Catholicism. I'm going to ask Annie to speak a little in her life about what faith and OCD and that integration looked like from the Jewish perspective. And you're muted, but you can unmute and then you will be right. No, you're fine. I do this on pretty much every stream at some point. So we got that out of the way.
How long have we been doing this virtual stuff? I'm so excited to be here. So I am Jewish, and I've been active in my faith probably my whole life, although from the time I was a young adult, I would say I started to get more and more involved, and over the past 8 or 9 years, even more so. As you mentioned, Katie, I'm a Jewish educator, so I'm pretty involved with the kids and so on, but also my own faith. I attend Shabbat services. Shabbat is the way we say Sabbath in Hebrew. And what's interesting is that I think something that's important for me to say is that I'm a member of a community that's referred to as Reform Judaism, which is a very liberal movement. And it's based a lot in choice. And so what I was taught is that it's my obligation to learn as much as I can about the beliefs, the values, the traditions, the practices that Judaism holds. And then it's up to me to make the choices to bring the practices into my life that bring meaning to me. Sound a little bit like ACT and ERP and, general OCD treatment. And so there's been all these connections between my faith and my OCD treatment that I really only recently started to see. I've probably had OCD since I was an adolescent, but didn't know what it was, as is so common with so many people. I knew I had these struggles. I knew I had anxiety and felt funny about things, but I didn't know why. And when I was 24 or 25, I picked up the book, which was one of the only books back then. I'm 59 now, so I was 24 or 25. I picked up the book, The Boy Who Couldn't Stop Washing. And I looked at the back cover and I said, oh my gosh, this explains so much. So that was when I was officially diagnosed, after I diagnosed myself. And treatment has changed so much. And it's been more recently that I've seen the connections between the things that I learn in my Jewish life and the things that are integral to OCD treatment. About 5 years ago, things started to really come together. I found myself in a couple different communities because of the result of a couple huge life stressors. So I found myself in a community of grief, a community of cancer survivors, my OCD treatment, so my mental health treatment, and my spirituality. And I started hearing messages that were the same from all the communities. If you hear something once, you can kind of go, oh, yeah, okay. And then you hear it again and you think, that's interesting. And if you keep hearing the same messages, at least I kind of thought to myself, well, maybe there's something to this. I guess I should start paying attention. And the messages were things like, give myself self-compassion and acceptance. And I can do things that are hard even though it feels awful, and I can develop resilience. I'm valuable. Let's let go of some self-judgment. All these amazing messages that started to come through from all these different groups. And so that's kind of how my strength kept getting stronger. That sounded kind of odd, but that was just kind of some of the development of the interweaving of the different parts of my life.
Thank you, Annie. And it is, I know we talk about often, so the Faith and OCD Special Interest Group, which I'll make sure that we add a link to at some point for anybody who wants to be involved with that, with the IOCDF, we talk a lot about self-compassion. And Annie has brought up a lot in that group, all of these different sources where we're hearing from our faith communities and maybe from the SIG or from our therapist about self-compassion and how it can be so hard to put into practice. And I'm excited to continue to hear from you tonight, because I know you always have so many great metaphors, even from your Jewish tradition, on where you're finding meaning with that. So thank you. And for folks listening, if you have trouble with self-compassion, that is okay. I literally talk to clients about self-compassion all day, every day, and I struggle with it massively in my own life. So we can get into that from a faith perspective too. But I'd first like to turn it over to Abby to talk a little bit, stepping away from just OCD, about why it's important to talk about mental health across faith communities, which you do so beautifully in the South Asian community and with the creation of Man Mukti. But why is this work significant?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question, and yeah, definitely one that we grapple with a lot, even just within the South Asian American community, within the work we do in Man Mukti, and obviously it's even a lot broader than that, looking outside of that community. I think one of the ways I would answer it is thinking back to my days when I was in theology school. I remember seeing this person wearing a shirt that said the shirt just said, "All things are subtly interconnected." And if somebody that wasn't in theology school with me, I was just like walking around campus and I saw somebody wearing that shirt. And I guess because of the mind space I was in, or the fact that I was reading about theology all the time, that shirt really struck me. And the saying all things are subtly interconnected, it felt like a theological statement to me in a lot of ways about how one of the major ways that a lot of people find God in Hinduism, or like think about the concept of God, is this overarching God known as a Brahman that sort of permeates everything in this sort of subtle way that is like the interconnection that we see in the world around us. And a really interesting metaphor that they use for it is it's basically like the salt in salt water. You can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't feel it. So you can't see it, you can't feel it, but every single sip that you take of that water from any corner of a glass, you taste the salt, right? You taste that interconnectedness of some spirit or something that sort of binds all of us together. And so this concept of being subtly interconnected, I think is a really beautiful one, and it's one that I kept going back to and thinking about what is important about bringing up mental health in faith communities. Oftentimes, right, faith communities can have different types of effects on people depending on their own experiences and their sort of specific circumstances, whether those faith communities help them with their mental health struggles, help them feel that interconnectedness, or whether they feel othered, right? There's so many ways that people with mental health in the modern world get othered by their communities, by society, by media, by faith communities sometimes, right? And finding a way to avoid that, I think, is so important in talking across faith communities, in talking about the importance of sharing mental health stories, the importance of feeling that interconnectedness among each other. This one example I would give is just in terms of how faith community can be both a site for helping with those issues and a site for making those issues worse. I'm sure all of you are bigger experts than I am on this topic, and so that when it comes to faith communities and all types of mental health, whether specifically OCD or others, there is the concept of assigning blame for mental health issues to spiritual manifestations, whether it's a spirit has taken you, or it's something you've done wrong religiously that's caused something or caused you to think a certain way. Those are attitudes of stigma oftentimes that can make it easy for a faith community to otherize somebody, or to make somebody feel like they can't go to their faith community for relief at a time when they really might need it, right? I've seen an example of this, of people sort of fighting against this in the work that I do with Man Mukti in a really powerful way. So when I was living in Boston for a couple of years, and I went to this local temple, and I specifically went with somebody who worked in the mental health space because they said that they knew a couple of friends who were going to give a talk about mental health at the temple. And so the temple has a community gathering every so often that they call a satsang, and it's basically a space for people to get together, chant some songs, religious songs, but then also speak a bit about something going on in the community. And on that particular evening, it was sort of the youth wing of the temple, or like the youth organization of the temple, had signed up to host the evening's discussion after the chanting. And their discussion was entirely revolving basically around mental health and examples of people in their community who have dealt with mental illness, and what that means, what that looks like, how to identify it. And the reactions were not always 100% positive, right? There was a lot of sort of pushback at first. There was a desire to assign some blame, things like that. But through talking openly about these issues in a faith setting, through talking openly with those who want to create a faith community that works for everyone, right? Because it was a sort of a temple gathering. People want to step away from those evenings with something good. we got to the end of the discussion, and while not everything was 100% positive, there was 100% unanimous decision amongst every person who attended that gathering that they should have more discussions about mental health, right? And I think to me that was like a really powerful thing that I saw happen, of these folks basically just going and talking about the importance of mental health in this sort of daunting faith setting, and creating an atmosphere where that would lead to further collaboration, further understanding. And I think the more that we do that through, whether it's sessions like these or going and speaking to faith communities directly, it creates such a powerful way for us to find those moments where we can feel more interconnected. So that's what I would say about that.
That was beautiful. And I want to just applaud all of the things that you just mentioned, and having these conversations in faith communities are so significant. And I know some folks listening on here have heard more. Yes, Matt, making mental health, creating mental health awareness is so important. My reason for not sharing for a long time about my OCD diagnosis was because I am clergy, and I was serving in a role as an interfaith chaplain with 2,700 families. And how would they view me? And what would that mean? What would that look like? And the reason I ended up really coming out with my story was the loss of someone in my life that I cared about deeply because of their mental health struggles, and a student that I felt was not able to share about those things because they didn't feel welcome to share in their faith tradition. And all of the other kids that I was seeing across the board, whether they were Christian or Jewish or Hindu or Muslim or Sikh or Jain, having similar struggles of not being able to talk about those things and really needing treatment. And for me, finally sharing the fact that I was their chaplain and I had been in treatment for OCD, not in a way that they felt like they needed to care for me, but a way of it's okay, was different than anything I would have experienced. I thought they wouldn't respect me anymore. And I started hearing from families saying, okay, now we can actually tell you what's going on. And how can we talk to our imam or our rabbi, our priest, our practitioner about what we're going through? So just want folks who are listening tonight to know that any conversation that you have or that you're able to have at your level of comfort makes such a difference in destigmatizing these conversations in faith communities. Specifically in thinking about OCD, this is really important over the holidays. I think this is a really tough time for folks. We had an IOCDF holiday party last night for lots of folks virtually, so some of y'all might have been there. And this always comes up, that it's an exciting time, but a time where we feel a lot of pressure to have fun, to not notice our intrusive thoughts, to not engage in compulsions, to be just as happy as everybody else on social media. And that can be really tough. So Emily, I wonder, as a clinician, what are some of the struggles you see for your clients at this particular time of year, or even over other holidays throughout the year that might be significant in their traditions?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing I would say is just even struggling with expectations for themselves, like what you were just saying, to expect that they don't have a flare up, for instance. So we know, like with any medical condition, which OCD is, that during times of stress, including even positive stress, holidays can be a mixed bag, for people, that symptoms can flare for all kinds of reasons, sometimes just due to the stress, but also, people can be exposed to triggers, or feel that, that they're unable to keep up with practices that have been helping keep symptoms at bay. Like maybe they're traveling and they're not able to do exposures or ritual prevention exercises that were helping them. So for all kinds of reasons, I think people struggle to kind of make sense of and not catastrophize or fall into all or nothing thinking if they're having a flare up. So it's really important to know that if you're having any kind of triggers, that this can be temporary, right? What we know is that the strategies that work will still work. For some people too, maybe they're not able to have a session for 2 to 3 weeks if they're in the midst of treatment, and people worry sometimes with OCD. Part of the OCD can be worrying, am I going to get worse if I'm not able to meet with my clinician. So, just knowing that is always going to be available to you, and having those expectations, that self-compassion, like you said. If you're already in treatment, having a plan with your clinician, right, about what you're going to do over the holidays, what's really feasible, and also how to talk back to catastrophizing thoughts if you are having a flare up. And just, financial pressures can add to this for people, say, with, financial OCD. So all kinds of things can expose people to more triggers. I think it's a really good time too for people who are struggling and might be interested in getting treatment to reach out, and set something up with an ERP specialist, for instance, in the new year. But just to remember that, however, OCD may start attaching to new things because you're in new situations, generalizing whatever those tools are that work for you. And as always, I would say, not defining yourself by whatever suffering or challenge you're going through, whether it's OCD, grief, a medical condition, family struggles, remembering that you are not your OCD. So I think those are some things that I'm hearing people working through.
And I love that reminder that you're not your OCD, that you are not defined by what you're experiencing, or even the symptoms that you might be experiencing, or your intrusive thoughts, or anything else. I know some of y'all heard at the last virtual conference, we did a talk on, okay, so you might have OCD, but you can still live a joyful life, and it can kind of come along for the ride. And in my own life, that's what I think about over the holidays, that sure, my intrusive thoughts might hop into my suitcase and come along with me, but I can wave at them and still have a beautiful time with my family, using all of the skills and tools that Emily's talked about, and also planning for next year and looking at what skills and tools might be helpful. Annie, I know you do a great job of this and in sharing this with others in our SIG, and I wonder what this might look like for you over the holidays, or even for others that you've had conversations with. Are there areas that have been challenging, or even where just are areas that you found hope over the holidays?
You're so good for my self-esteem, Katie.
It's all true, and you know that.
Well, so I have to be honest, I don't think the holidays are any more stressful for me in terms of OCD, but I can just kind of talk about the things that help me whenever it's flaring, or, when I'm having lots of intrusive thoughts. Basically, my faith, I think I don't have the typical religious scrupulosity the way a lot of people struggle with it. I think I have, it comes in, like you said, Emily, OCD is going to attack the things that matter to us the most. And so there are times when it comes in and attacks my teaching or my faith, in terms of, I shouldn't be going to temple because I might endanger the people that are there. But I started coming to the Faith and OCD SIG because I see myself as somebody who's really involved in my faith, and I use that to navigate my life with the OCD always there. So at Hanukkah, at any time, I'm often thinking back to the things that I'm taught about our values, our Jewish values, which I now chuckle when I say that, because the Jewish values I'm talking about are human values, things like courage and strength and joy and resilience. Those are human. But of course, they're in the context for me of my Judaism. So for instance, Hanukkah is a celebration of miracles and religious freedom and rededication and light. And so I keep getting reminded of the ideas like, we all have a spark of holiness in us, and we can create the light that we need in the darkness. It's literal for us with the menorah that I have right here. Tonight's the third night of Hanukkah. So I had it sitting there to remind myself. But the whole celebration is all about life and moving toward the things that are important to us. I actually wanted to share one thing that I just learned recently about, or was reminded about Hanukkah. A lot of people who know the story of Hanukkah might know that it's considered a holiday of miracles because there was this oil that lasted longer than it was expected. There was a war, the temple was destroyed, they went to rededicate it, and they had to light the light that's always lit in a synagogue called the eternal light that signifies that God is always around us. And they found a vessel of oil, and it looked like it was only enough oil to last for 1 day, and it had to be lit constantly. So what was brought to my attention recently is that the miracle that we often think of is that the oil lasted for 8 days, but actually another miracle is that the Jews had what a rabbi I love calls holy chutzpah, the nerve, the strength to light the lamp to begin with. They could have just said, oh, let's wait till we have enough oil. But they didn't. They said, we don't know what's going to happen, uncertainty, but we're going to go ahead and light the lamp anyway. So it's things like that are really helpful to me whenever I'm having a struggle, to keep remembering the values, the fact that we're all created in God's image and all those really beautiful things. And Abby, by the way, I was going to say that when you talked about we're all connected, our most important prayer that we say, the Shema, talks about God being one, but also we talk about how we are all one. All of us everywhere are all basically one and part of the same universe. So I wanted to share that connection that I felt.
Thank you, Annie. My interfaith chaplain heart is like smiling with all of these awesome connections across faith traditions and mental health and the insight that we're offering for different folks, and such a great place to transition to Avi, where I just would love to hear some of the ways Man Mukti, or the work that you've done, what have you found is helpful over the holidays? And I know across our faith traditions, the holidays that are challenging might be different, but they can be really tough. And what are some things that y'all have worked on or that have come up that have been helpful?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll be honest that my time in Man Mukti, I feel like as much as I worked to increase awareness, so much of my time there was me learning from others who I worked with on their own mental health struggles, and becoming more sort of empathetic to that, to what they were going through individually, which I had no clue about. And one of those things for me definitely was how much the holidays can be tough for some people, and how much time with family can be tough for some people, especially in our instance, in the kind of communities that we work with. Oftentimes a lot of mental health pressure or issues with the folks we work with comes from not being able to talk to their families about the fact that they have mental illness, or not being able to sort of find some sort of light past all of the stigma that they feel, whether it's within their faith community specifically, or just even within a family home. And so I think we were formed, as you mentioned in your bio of me, Katie, because I lost a dear friend to mental health issues. And I think one of the main things we wanted to do with the organization, by the way, the words Man Mukti translate to mental liberation. And one of the main things we really wanted to do was to have people feel like they weren't alone in what they were going through, because that's what stigma does, right? It makes you feel very alone with the issues that you're facing. And so we did a couple of things around that, right? One was, the main sort of onus of the work Man Mukti does is to share stories. We're really just a platform and a conduit for that, so that people who are going through, whatever they're going through in terms of their mental health struggles can share that with others, and to make others feel like they aren't as alone with what they're going through. And that has been really powerful, just to have people, whether they reach out to us or they reach out to those who share their stories and just say that, hey, like, I thought I was only one dealing with this. And it'll be dozens of people who are thinking that, or hundreds of people who are thinking that, right? And creating that community through shared storytelling, I think, has been a really important part of what we do, and specifically for sort of arming people to go into the holidays, where they may feel a flare up of their issues around family or around just this time of the year. I think that was really important, just to help them feel like they're not alone. And specifically, we created, we have created in the past campaigns around the holidays, especially at this time of year, thinking about the holidays of Christmas going into the new year. So we've just given people some small tips and tricks about, how to, step away when needed, or how to think about things in a different light, perhaps when feeling like they're facing a lot of stigma at home, or they're feeling like they can't be themselves, or even they're feeling like they're just, something about home triggers other mental health issues for them. And so, I think two things is, one, just the general sharing of stories that we do, and then two, specific targeted social media campaigns and other things around this time of year to just remind people. And one of the things we do, we typically do a holiday drive around this time, just to raise funds, not every year, but on occasion. And I feel like that's been interesting, just to have that as like as a big marketing push around that time. And I know I've seen people have the experience of using just the fact that Man Mukti is trying to raise funds, to use it as like a reason to talk to their families about mental health, right? Like, hey, maybe we donate to this organization, or like, hey, what do you guys think of this? They're doing this really interesting work in mental health, and it becomes a foot in the door to talk about the organization. And then you can, a foot in the door to maybe one day being more open with one's family or one's loved ones about it. And so I think, that's just a few examples of some of the stuff that we do around this time.
Thank you so much, Avi. Beautiful. And it really leads me into the big topic of tonight, which is finding light in the darkness. And I will have to give my former students credit for this in my time as chaplain at Woodward, that my awesome, I always say kiddos, but I worked with a lot of awesome 17 and 18-year-old leaders across their faith traditions. And my last year there, they came up with this great idea. They said, we have light in all of our faith traditions. We really want to do this whole big thing in December. And we actually even pulled in Diwali had already Diwali had already taken place, and we pulled in Ramadan actually from months down the road to include all of the students. But they said, we want to talk about how we always find light in the darkness in our faith traditions. And it was neat. We invited the whole community, and each student spoke about where they find light in the darkness in their different holidays. And this is a time, especially for folks, I think, with OCD or who might be struggling with their mental health, that can feel really dark. And it can feel like there's light all around me. Again, there's light on social media. I have friends who are in spaces of light, but I feel like I'm in darkness because of what I'm navigating. And I wonder, y'all have spoken so beautifully to the fact that our faith traditions can serve as beautiful areas of hope, and then sometimes also, can be challenging places of not understanding mental health. But in the area of finding light in the darkness, I wonder how you think people might find light in the darkness. Are there specific examples that you see in Advent, in Hanukkah, in Diwali, in different aspects of faith traditions of helping folks find that light? So Emily, I'll go to you first in any way that you want to speak to that.
Sure. I think this is such an important question. And, a few thoughts come to mind. I think one thing that's really important to remember is that, we can sometimes see things in the dark that we can't see when we're in spaces of light, and some of those things are very powerful and can be life-changing. For example, I think something that's very commonly experienced is empathy, right? When we go through situations, we can sometimes have a new lens on what others might be experiencing. But one thing I think, picking up on what Abby was saying, is that it's really important to find those safe people in our lives to talk with and connect with. I know for me personally, that's probably one of the greatest spaces where I find light, and where I experience, like, God and Christ in my life, is through other people, and their compassion. And I was listening to a podcast on grief, um, and I thought it was so beautiful. One of the people interviewed was saying that when we remain silent about whatever challenge we're going through, whether it's mental illness, grief, medical suffering, we keep ourselves in this pit. But if we can open up and connect with someone else and talk about what we're going through and share with maybe someone else who either has shared some of that experience or can just bring compassion and validation, it opens up experiences of other emotions. And now we're not just stuck in those dark feelings. But this isn't about making those feelings go away. It's about, can they become, now this experience can become like a tunnel to something new. So I think that's really important. And also, like, pausing and maybe doing some self-reflection. Like, it's really hard and it can be easy to fall into like a victim mindset, but like, how do we sort of stay in self-compassion and also allow this question of like, where might be the growth in this for me? It's not about like just positive thinking, I'm going through this hard thing, but like, it's a maturity that's a real mature, I think, spiritual human question to ask is, how might I grow through this? And then the last thing I would say that I think is sort of universal is this idea of giving, right? It can be so hard when we're hurting to even think we have something to give. But even if it's in some small way, like listening to somebody who you see at a dinner, or whatever way you can give, whether it's your presence, maybe you're going to go volunteer and do something. So I think there's a lot of ways like that come to mind when I think about light in the darkness.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Emily. Annie, the same question. Where do you find light in the darkness? And I know you spoke a little bit earlier to the Hanukkah component with that too, but I wonder how this speaks to you.
Well, Emily, you said an awful lot of things that totally resonated with me. I think the big thing for me, and it comes straight out of Judaism, is the connection, the community. Even though Hanukkah is mostly a home-based holiday, we do, of course, celebrate it also when we go to services for Shabbat, which is every week. But there are traditions that highlight the importance of things like that. For instance, we're asked to put our menorah in the window so that other people can see it. And we reach out for connection to our community. For me, I think it's all about community. The times when I feel most in the dark are when I'm alone. I've often said this in our SIG meetings and support group meetings that I go to. I feel so together when I'm with other people. I feel like I have this, I'm capable and I can live life with the OCD nagging me. And then when I'm home alone, I don't feel so confident anymore. So I get a lot of strength from the people that are around me who can offer me, reflections of myself and my strength and my courage and things like that. I think I forgot to mention earlier that I've really gotten into Jewish mindfulness meditation. And again, there's nothing really different about Jewish mindfulness than any other mindfulness, except that what people do, I have a favorite rabbi who leads us in Jewish mindfulness meditation twice a week. And she starts out either with the Torah portion of the week, our Bible, or a holiday, themes from the holidays, and then leads us into the meditation for the day. So I've learned so much from those sessions and gotten a lot of practice at acceptance, patience, resilience, self-compassion. And the only other thing I think I would add is we have so many stories and so many little bits of teachings that really help. And if you want, I can share one or two. I actually just this year heard this this one thing. The name of the month that Hanukkah falls in is called Kislev. And if you break it apart, Kis is a pocket or a small thing, and Lev is heart. So it's a pocket of the heart. And what this person said was that the month of Kislev asks us to reach down deep and put a comforting hand on our heart and its desires so that we can bring them into the light. I mean, how beautiful is that? So, and then the only other thing I read recently was the lights of the Hanukkah menorah are a reminder not only of the menorah in the old temple that was rededicated, but also the light that shines within each of us. So it's things like that that just keep giving me hope as I'm going through hard times, dark times.
Thank you, Annie, for offering us that light. And it looks like Matt in the chat resonates with that as well. So thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And then Avi, where do you find that light in the darkness, either in faith traditions or in mental health conversations?
Yeah, for sure. I think Diwali is often, considered the festival of lights and very much fits into this. So I'd like to just say a few words about that. So yeah, similar to Annie, I learned a couple of new things about Diwali this year in terms of its origins and different ways that it's celebrated. So, for those who are unfamiliar, it's, like I said, it's often considered a festival of lights, and there's a mythological sort of story that goes along with it of this great, hero King Ram, who goes and defeats this demon and brings back his wife who's been abducted. And one of the common reasons that Diwali is a festival of lights is it's the day that Ram comes home after that sort of victorious battle, and the citizens of the land basically all light lamps to show him the path to get home, and to show that they're super happy about him coming home, and bringing about this a new age of just success, and being back in the kingdom. And that's I feel like a story that I often shared whenever people asked what Diwali was my whole life, and it's a very common sort of answer to what it means, why people light lamps. I also learned that this Diwali coincides with the lunar calendar, and it specifically falls supposed to fall on the darkest day in the darkest quarter of the year. And there's so many reasons other than the story I just told why people light lamps throughout India and Hinduism around that specific time. It often is around the same time as Halloween, and funny enough, there's several areas of India where people light lamps to ward away ghosts, and there are several areas where people light lamps to bring in ghosts, similar to like a Day of the Dead within Mexican culture, of like lighting a path for your ancestors to come home and visit you. And so I was really just heartened to see this, to learn this stuff this year, because it's sort of goes along with my constant thinking about Hinduism, that there's just like no one path to anything, and that there's like so many different explanations to play with for something as basic as why do we light lamps on Diwali. And so for me, I feel like what really stuck was all of those cases, all of those sort of three reasons that people light lamps have to do with it being the darkest day and the darkest quarter of the year, right? Whether it's the end of a war, or whether it's something to do with the astrology and like having the time for spirits and ancestors to visit. I think it's similar to what Emily was saying earlier. It's when things are darkest that you have an opportunity to sort of really see yourself, to see others in a new light. And it's almost like to me, it represents a lot of like the stubbornness of faith, right? That when things are darkest, like we have a reason to light a candle, to light a flame, and to just keep it going for longer than the one day that it's supposed to last, or whatever other sort of faith traditions that may be wrapped up in it. But yeah, I think in that way, there's so many reasons to think about the stubbornness of light and flame in a positive way, and how we persist with that.
Thank you, Avi. These are just such beautiful examples, and I'm sure that everyone watching or who's watching later on will resonate with something that they've heard tonight. And yeah, I would love, Emily, if you want to share a little something about the Advent component, that would be wonderful. Oh, you're muted. It's okay. It always has to happen at least twice during a stream. Oh, you're still muted. There we go. 3 times the charm.
No, I was just really moved listening to both of you, Annie and Abby, about the lighting of lamps and candles in your traditions. And I've been really reconnecting with this tradition, having a 7-year-old who's learning about it for the first time. And in general, in my tradition, we often have candles in churches or basilicas that when people are going through a hard time, it's always available to kind of go and, light a candle before, say, a statue of the Blessed Mary or a favorite saint, and say a prayer. And I think what light does universally symbolize is hope, right? But also kind of like a waiting and a letting go of knowing what an outcome may be, right? And I think what it can do, I know for me personally, is help me be in the present moment. Something about lighting that and letting go. And so with Advent, it's really about waiting and patience, but waiting in a state of hope, kind of anticipating that these values that were brought into the world, through this particular voice of the birth of this child, Jesus, in our tradition, we're anticipating that. And it was really kind of a funny story. We kind of opened our gifts early because we're traveling, and we've learned the hard way not to do Santa in 2 states. So we had Santa come last weekend and did our family gifts. And my husband was kind of, last minute. Anyway, so my son was just like, Mommy, Advent's about patience. So I think we need to wait to kind of buy time. Let's go light the candle and remember, like, patience for good things to come. So, but I think hope and strength and for patience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily. We had some questions in the chat earlier as well, and I just want folks to know that I know we didn't get into specific ERP stuff tonight. This was kind of a more specialized town hall, but I did in fact see the questions that we had about contamination, about forbidden ingredients in food, as well as the unpardonable sin. And I do want folks to know that we care deeply about those questions. And we do have an OCD mailbag where we take all the questions that we might not have answered during a stream, and we make sure to get to those. And you all are also always welcome to reach out after to info@iocdf.org. Or you can find me on Instagram at RevK_runs_beyond_OCD, and I'll make sure to get those answered for you too. So want to note that we see those and that we care deeply about that. And really, I know we're coming to the close of our time, so just want to go around one more time. And I know, Annie, you had another piece to share too, but just give everybody a final moment. If you have one thing that you want to leave folks with tonight about finding light in the darkness. And Annie, I know you had a piece, so I'm going to go to you first so that Avi and Emily can think about what their final component is.
Okay, somehow I'll try to wrap that into I may not be getting this story exactly right, but there's a story about when God was creating the world and wanted to something about they had to hide God's holiness, God's essence, and where would they hide it? And everywhere that God suggested, the angels who God was talking to said, no, people will find it. I think I'm messing the story up. But anyway, the end of the story is that they went through all these different places. Should we hide it on the top of a mountain? No, they'll climb up and get it. In the ocean? No, they'll find it. So they decided to hide this spark of holiness inside the human soul, every single human soul. And so we all have a spark of God, of holiness, of what's important to us inside of us. So I guess that's what I want to leave everybody with.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Annie. Emily, do you have something you want to leave folks with tonight?
Yeah, I just want to say, just really, this is a season across traditions of hope. And if you're living with OCD and any struggle in life, there really is good reason to hope for ease and for finding meaning with whatever you're dealing with. Literally, we have excellent treatment for OCD. I saw a lot of comments that people are struggling with. There are good specialists out there who really can help with all of those specific concerns you raised that we couldn't really speak to. And so don't give up finding someone who really knows how to help you with your manifestations. And then just generally in life, whatever it is you're dealing with, just because we can't see yet what the resource may be or how we may be helped, doesn't mean it's not out there. Keep looking for resources, listen to podcasts, find books, talk to people. And so I would just say, really, don't give up on hope itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for offering that hope, and even for our friends in the chat with questions, that there is hope, and that there is so much space to take steps forward. I always say these big, beautiful, awesome lives that we are created to live, regardless of what OCD has to say in the moment. So thank you, Emily. And Avi, would you like to close us with anything?
Yeah, well, I can't top what was just said by both Emily and Annie. Thank you all so much for the wonderful sentiments. And from all three of you, I feel like I've learned so much over the past hour. I hope all of our participants have felt the same as well. I would just say that, just to echo what's already been said, there's so much within our faith traditions in the concept of light in the darkness, whether it's the light within each of us, whether it's the light that charts a path towards the unknown, or whether it's a light that helps us be patient. I would say there's so many opportunities and ways for us to access faith in dark times, and I just hope that everybody on the call has at least walked away with some new take on those concepts today that they can share with others. And given how much Manmukti is about sharing stories and helping break down barriers, I would just say I hope that people can walk away with something to share with someone else in their life and with their loved ones, to the extent that they're comfortable about what was said today. And I hope it can sort of create a chain of light that helps bring that into someone else's dark moment.
Thank you so much, Avi. I think our speakers, well, I know our speakers and our panelists tonight, as we often talk about uncertainty with OCD, I'm not certain about a lot, but I'm pretty certain that these folks brought some light in the darkness for some folks who might be struggling. Just wanted to point out a resource as well that we have up with the IOCDF at the bottom of your screen, iocdf.org/faith-OCD. It's our Faith and OCD resource page that our task force created, which has resources across faith traditions for those who might be navigating religious scrupulosity. If you head over there, you'll also see that we have a conference coming up in May. So we have this roundtable every other month, but we have lots of other things going on, from the SIG to this resource page to the conference. And beginning in January, if you're someone who wants to get involved with the SIG, we're doing faith and OCD kind of social media type campaigns all leading up to the conference, talking about faith and uncertainty and self-compassion and how that fits together across faith traditions. Just a couple more announcements before we log off tonight. So I do want to note that in addition to all of these awesome faith and OCD initiatives, camp registration is open for online OCD camp. You can register for this awesome event created for youth with OCD and their families. The program will include live sessions for parents and guardians and opportunities for fun socialization with other families. To register, you can visit iocdf.org/camp. And then finally, The giving season is upon us. This holiday season and all year round, your support makes what we do possible. So you can provide help, healing, and hope to OCD and related disorders community by making a gift to the IOCDF. You can visit the IOCDF website to donate today. And finally, if you enjoyed this live stream, which I really hope you all did, this is one of many. You can see our entire schedule of future streams at iocdf.org/peace of mind. And just a note, tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, there's a special Ask the Experts with Chris and Liz, who will be doing a Q&A with all of your questions. And actually next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we are going to have a special holiday week live stream that it'll be me and all of your lead advocates and national advocates, and we'll be on there for a special Here for Your Holidays, where everybody can come on and talk about what they might be navigating, and we'll do our best really to dive in and just answer questions. It'll strictly be a Q&A and a support session. Then also you can view recordings of past live streams, as well as watch our hosts answer your pre-submitted questions, like I mentioned earlier, on OCD Mailbag, on IOCDF's YouTube channel, youtube.com/IOCDF. And finally, remember to like and subscribe to get notified, lots of words, when live streams are scheduled. If you need resources, we always encourage you to visit iocdf.org. And I just truly appreciate everyone being here and the support and offering light and love to one another. And just in closing with this topic, I want you all to know that I spent a lot of my OCD journey feeling like I was in the dark. And there is a lot of light to be found. I tell clients every day that, as Emily noted, we don't have to push away the grief or those tough feelings or those tough emotions, but we can hold all of that and still find beauty in the brokenness. So as you find beauty in the brokenness, or turn your pain into purpose, or your mess into your message, I hope that you are able to really feel and hold and do all of those things this holiday season, and know that we are absolutely with you in your corner, and that you are not alone as you continue to find light in the darkness. And you might even be the light in the darkness for someone else in your life. So thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.